Good afternoon. I'm so excited to speak to you about a topic that I feel so deeply passionate about, and that is keeping society moving forward with medical device development. Now, when I use the word medical device, many of you might think that I'm only referring to gadgets and toys. But when we look at the World Health Organization's definition of medical device, you'll see that this is a much broader field. Yes, it includes the machines, appliances, and software, but it also includes the materials, the chemicals, and anything that is used either alone or in combination for human beings for a medical purpose. With my only definition for the day out of the way, I will take you through 4 phases in this presentation today. First, we'll have a quick look at the past and where society came from in terms of medical device development. We'll stand still in the present and see where we are now. And then we'll move to the future. And after that, I'll give you an indication of what my role is in getting us there. Our look at the past, I'll start with a quote by Confucius, stating that, "Study the past if you would define the future." And for this purpose, I've selected 6 medical technologies that I think really changed the course of history for mankind and medical devices. And while not much happened until the mid-1800s in terms of medical technology, the 1800s is really an exciting time to look at technology. The first device that I would like to focus on is the invention of the stethoscope. And this is a device that I am very, very thankful for. Prior to having the stethoscope, a doctor would have to place his or her ear on the body of the patient to be able to hear what's going on inside. Not only was this method very inaccurate because it depended on the placement of the ear and the hearing of the physician, it also would have been a very uncomfortable experience for both the patient and the doctor to have the doctor place his ear on your chest. So when French physician René Laennec in 1816 developed the stethoscope, it revolutionized the way that examinations and diagnosis could be made. And if you have a look at the device that he developed and the stethoscope you and I are used to by now, you see that there's a remarkable resemblance between the two devices. Antiseptic theory, a discovery in 1867, is also something that changed the course of history forever. Before this date, doctors never thought about sterilizing either their equipment or their facilities between patients or even between operations. And you can think how much bacteria would have spread from one patient to the other, all being sick people visiting the doctor. So in this age of COVID-19, where all of us are living with some form of sanitizer somewhere in our very close vicinity, it is really so remarkable to think that there was a time that this technology was not something that existed at all. Next, we look at the discovery of X-rays. And for the first time, doctors were able to see past skin and see what was going on inside of the body. And this technology really made an enormous difference for soldiers at the time. The next 2 devices we'll consider as a pair. The first being the hollow needle. And I don't know about you, but I'm really, really relieved that I didn't live in 1844 to experience that hollow needle, and that the needles that you and I need to endure look much more like this. So this needle, in combination with the syringe, which was mentioned briefly in 1650, but only perfected in 1853 by Alexander Wood, very much resembles the syringes that you and I are used to by now. The combination of the hollow needle and the syringe really brought about a significant change in history. For the first time, medicines could be injected and people could have access to vaccines. And in this time, while we're looking for a vaccine or waiting for a vaccine for the coronavirus, you can imagine how big a significance this had at that point in time. Our last stop down memory lane is at the ophthalmoscope. And this device, developed in 1847, allowed us for the first time to see what was going on inside the eye and learn from the inside of the eye what the health of not only the eye but also the rest of the body would be. When you look at the 6 devices that I just presented, you will see that they all have one thing in common, and that is that they haven't changed much in terms of either form or function since the very first developed device in the 1800s and the device that you and I are used to in our doctor's offices. The digital age that we're living in is really revolutionizing medical device development for the first time in hundreds of years. The first device, we're back at the stethoscope. And with digital technology, we can now have access to digital stethoscopes. We can now not only amplify the sound much better, but we can also have much better sound quality because the ambient noise can be reduced completely. An ophthalmoscope, now connected to a phone, not only allows you to explore the health inside the eye, but also save that image and store it for later analysis and comparison with future investigations of the eye. And what a way have we come from that first X-ray that would have taken a lot of time not only to take but also to develop. But now we have access to digital images of CT and CAT scan images that we can browse on tablets and also send to other doctors to be able to use instantaneously. At this point, you might be thinking that, sure, that's really cool technology, but what are the odds that we'll have access to things like that in South Africa? And then I'd like to remind you that, like Chris Barnard performed the first heart transplant in South Africa, South Africans have always been innovative thinkers that come up with extraordinary technologies. The CAT scan, for instance, is a combination between a British physician and a South African engineer who for the first time used the theory of X-rays and had the fields move and rotate around the body. And that enabled physicians to have a detailed cross-section view of what was going on inside of the body. Innovation is not always something you can plan, and some discoveries happen purely by chance. Like, for instance, the first full-body X-ray machine that was also developed in South Africa. This machine can take an entire full-length body X-ray of 1.8 meters in a mere 20 seconds. In a trauma instance, this really means the difference between life and death for a patient. Normally, it would take about 20 minutes to construct an X-ray of that vastness using conventional technology. And since the time that the patient are exposed to the harmful chemicals and radiation, it is also much safer for patients to be. But more than 10 years before this was regarded as a medical device, it was used in the diamond industry as a method of detecting whether someone was stealing diamonds from a mine. And there are many more South African success stories that really get me excited about medical device industry in South Africa. But it's time for us to move on to the future. And in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. In my opinion, there are 4 main areas in which the most revolutionary changes will be made during the next 10 to 20 years. And that is virtual reality and augmented reality technology, additive manufacturing or 3D printing as you might know it, Internet of Things technology or IoT, and robotics. A few years ago, images like these would have been something out of a sci-fi film, but now it is becoming more and more of a reality, where surgeons are able to practice surgeries before going into the actual operation, where they can really visualize much more of the patient's internal structure and the challenges that they might experience when getting inside. 3D printing technology is growing in popularity, and with that is becoming more and more affordable. So many of you might have seen a 3D printer by now. Maybe you have access to one at your school or even in your home. And while fully functioning 3D printed organs may not be a reality yet, only last year the first 3D printed inner ear bone transplant took place right here in South Africa. The Central University of Technology have also harnessed additive manufacturing as a way of manufacturing implants since the early 1990s already. 3D printing is a huge enabler in the manufacturing of custom-made prostheses and robotic prostheses, and we can prototype much easier, faster, and cheaper than we ever had before. The Internet of Medical Things is something that is hotly discussed all over the world. And while it seems like a very futuristic topic, many of you might be wearing a fitness watch at this stage. And by wearing that watch, you're keeping track of your movement and your activity, your sleep, your heart rate, and keep using that in combination with some of the apps on your phone to keep track of your diet or the medicines you take. You are already actively participating in the medical Internet of Things. The COVID-19 pandemic led to some changes in terms of the remote medicine regulations in South Africa. So some of you might have experienced your first virtual consultation with your doctor at this stage. And while this might have been a light introduction for the common cold, it is just a short leap from having a fully remote doctor experience where a doctor can have a full view of what's going on with a specific patient over vast distances, even from a different country, and have access to your medical records and assist doctors on site to make an accurate diagnosis of what's going on with a specific patient. Automated robots is something that we're used to seeing in the car manufacturing industry, but you will see a striking resemblance between these robots and the medical robots currently being used in theaters in some places in the world. And while these robots are certainly not operating on you on their own, they can be operated by experienced physicians who can simultaneously work on a single patient from multiple angles that would not have been possible if people were to cram in that space at the same time. And while they are in the same room in this instance, sometime in future these surgeries might also happen over vast distances. I always tell people that I have the best job in the world, and the reason for that is that I get to play with really exciting technologies, but also I get to see the change that I can make in the world. So for this final section of my presentation, I'll look at my role in getting us there. And I honestly believe that I can change the world, and people think I'm totally crazy for thinking that, but I cling to this quote by Steve Jobs saying that the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are usually the ones who do. Our team at the Northwest-University are fortunate to dabble in all four of the exciting technology areas that I've just told you about. My personal favorite being IoT technology, since I have a background in telecommunications, and I really enjoy implementing this technology and taking the way that we experience rehabilitation and therapy forward in the future. In terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have implemented this technology in screening, diagnostics, and also in remote patient monitoring. In terms of medical robotics, we have developed some rehabilitation aids that can both assist the therapy process, manage it, and sense whether it is happening correctly or often enough. And we are also developing this technology to assist the frail or disabled to be able to do more tasks. Most of our rehabilitation aids are created using 3D printing technology, but really exciting things that are also happening at the Northwest University is the 3D printing of skin cells and also the manufacturing of medicines using 3D printing technology. The latest addition to our skill set is the application of augmented reality technology in the therapy space. And we're collaborating with the School of Nursing Sciences to change the way their nurses are trained in terms of trauma experiences by using this technology. We're also investigating, along with speech therapists and occupational therapists, how augmented reality and virtual reality technology can be used to augment the therapy experience. My team of dedicated students and colleagues have come up with a number of very interesting applications of the technology for the South African market. Here you can see 3 of these products. In the top left, you can see an infantometer. This is a device that can be used to weigh and measure a baby in one simultaneous action. This means that the baby needs to be handled much less. Furthermore, all of the data is recorded digitally, which means that there's less room for error when data needs to be recorded by hand. And since we already have the data digitally available, we can now also do some analytics on that data. And if something falls outside the range that we're expecting, then we can automatically also alarm someone, like a dietitian, for instance, that can act on these outliers and assist the baby long before something really bad needs to happen. In the middle, you will be able to see our robotic automated hand rehabilitation device for stroke survivors. This device not only administers the exercise protocol for a specific patient, but the therapist can also remotely view what's going on in terms of the therapy process. They can see whether the patient is doing their exercises enough, whether they're doing it correctly, and whether these exercises are actually working. And then the Chop app is something that some of your schools might be using as a method of collecting the digital screening information for the COVID-19 protocols that needs to be performed at each school each day. My personal happy space, where I feel most at home, is where I can put myself in the shoes of the users that will be using our technology. And at this stage, I focus on the user experience design of eHealth applications. Here you can see 3 of the interfaces that I have designed that needs to be used by someone that is not an engineer. There are many reasons why I say I have the best job in the world, but I think the most exciting one must be the people I get to meet. I have traveled to 20% of the world by now, and in this experience got to meet the most interesting people from all walks of life. People who look at life vastly different than I do, people who interact with technology differently, and people who have access to much more or much less than I do. I think the people makes this job worthwhile. Many people think that engineers are only left-brain people, analytical people that have little creativity, and that could not be further from the truth. The second perk, I think, is that I get to use my entire brain when tackling a problem. I can use both logical thinking and my natural curiosity to explore the perfect product for a person. I can also have great attention to detail, and be able to communicate that to a team of people who needs to act. I can solve the world's most exciting problems and do that with creativity and innovation. And one of the biggest traits of an engineer is the ability to learn through your entire life. And you do that through teamwork and by learning from others. Another significant perk of my job is that I get to make a difference and change lives. And I can do that for such a vast variety of people. And I will forever get the biggest kick out of people actually using the devices I develop and the change that they experience as a result of using that technology. The satisfaction, the personal satisfaction that I get from that is something that money can never buy. The final perk of my job that I'd like to mention is the team. I always tell my students that engineering is a team sport. And I think that the great strength in our team lies in allowing each person in the team to rely on their strengths. We harness these strengths to complement each other and to come up with technology that is not only correctly implemented, but is also the correct selection for that specific problem. Now, after listening to me, you might wonder, how did I get to the point in my life where I am now? Well, I can tell you that the success I'm experiencing currently did definitely not happen overnight. And it was definitely not always easy. But during each phase of my life, which sometimes took longer than I thought, or some things went faster than I thought it would, I was always more fortunate than I anticipated at that point in my life. I was very fortunate to grow up in Pretoria and go to a very excellent school with great teachers that were dedicated to the kids they were teaching. I grew up in a stable home, and I was fortunate to have a bursary to come and study engineering. At varsity, I learned to work hard. At university level, it doesn't matter how smart you are, unless you are willing to work very hard every day, you will not succeed. And I learned to make the right friends that were focused on their studies, who encouraged me when times got hard, and who I grew with during my studies. After my undergraduate degree in computer and electronic engineering at the Noordwes-Universiteit, I completed a master's degree in telecommunication and network engineering. There I got to meet the most exciting people in the telecommunications industry in South Africa. And for the first 10 years after my undergraduate degree, I focused solely on the telecommunications industry. I then completed my doctoral degree in engineering management, and I got to get a different view of the education sphere specific to engineering in South Africa. And at that point, I had 3 awesome children. But I think just like everything else molded me into the person I am today, having kids maybe resulted in the biggest change in my life. At that point, I realized that if I were to spend time away from my kids, I want to do that by focusing on something with a purpose. And that is why I turned my attention to the medical device industry and applying my telecommunications skills and Internet of Things experience in this sphere, because of the difference I can make, and because I can assure myself that the time I spend away from my children, I'm spending making a difference. Then 2020 has been an incredibly hard year for all of us. It certainly didn't go anything according to the plans I had. I was planning on traveling a lot. I had some very interesting visits scheduled all over the world. And then I got to stay home and work from home, which was a very interesting experience. But while it was a horrible year for many people, and I have complete empathy for all the people's lives who were disrupted in this very, very difficult time, I can also tell you that this was the year that I grew the most and the year that I've achieved the most in my 13 years as an engineer in academia. During this year, I learned that we do not always need an excuse to work together. People from all over the country are collaborating in terms of medical device development, from different universities, from different companies, and everybody is doing it for the same reason, because they want to make a difference and because they want us all to move forward. And I think nobody knows what the future will hold. Nobody knows how long this will continue or how we will emerge from this. But I think the most important thing for us to remember during this very challenging time is to keep moving forward, to not use our face masks as a way of shutting our eyes and only focusing on ourselves. But it should now be the time that all of us focus outwards, seeing and observing the problems and thinking of innovative ways that we can make a difference in that. And as soon as we focus on other people instead of ourselves, we are much more positive, we see opportunities for change, and we keep society moving forward. So I'd like to conclude by telling you, dare to dream, because life holds a special magic for those who dare to dream. And keep moving forward. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. So, with those words, I would like to tell you that I'm living my dream, the dream of a little girl in Pretoria who told everyone that she would change the world. So go forward, dare to start dreaming, and then start to live your dream.